Parliament of United Kingdom. The Parliament of United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. It is commonly known internationally as the Parliament of United Kingdom or British Parliament, but domestically this is known as simply Parliament. In this video lecture we will see the history of Parliament of United Kingdom. Before we will go to the history of Parliament of United Kingdom, let's see a brief introduction of this Parliament. It is the supreme legislative body of United Kingdom, Crown dependencies and overseas territories. For those people who are unaware about Crown dependencies and overseas territories, Crown dependencies are the three islands at off the coast of Britain and are self-governing possessions of British Crown. These included the Bailiwick of Guernsey, the Bailiwick of Jersey and the Isle of Man. These Crown dependencies do not form the part of United Kingdom or overseas territories. Internationally, United Kingdom is responsible for these Crown dependencies, but they are independent in their internal affairs. They are not part of Commonwealth of Nations and not part of European Union. So although they do have different teams in Commonwealth camps, but they are not part of Commonwealth, and they are free internally, but as far as their external matters, foreign affairs are concerned, United Kingdom is responsible, and the British Parliament is responsible to see the affairs of these Crown dependencies as well. And the other section is the overseas territories. It may be also a new term for so many students. These overseas territories are 14 in number. These are the territories which are not granted independence after the end of colonial rule, or they have voted in favor to remain under the Crown. So the sovereign in these overseas territories is also the Queen Elizabeth, and they are also internally independent, but their foreign affairs and defense is under the British Crown. So the British Parliament is also responsible for these segments as well, to the United Kingdom and the three Crown dependencies and 14 overseas territories. Those who want to know more about Crown dependencies and overseas territories, please visit our another lectures on these two important issues, Crown dependencies and overseas territories. To visit lectures on these, please subscribe to our channel. This Parliament alone possesses the legislative supremacy. That is, as far as the legislation is concerned, Parliament is the supreme body in the country. Parliament is headed by the sovereign of UK, who is the Queen Elizabeth. She is the current sovereign of UK since 1952. Its seat is the Palace of Westminster in the city of Westminster. Westminster is one of the inner boroughs of the city of London. Composition of current Parliament. The current British Parliament is the 57th Parliament of United Kingdom. It is a bicameral Parliament. It means it's comprised of two houses, the House of Lords and House of Commons, and it is headed by the Queen Elizabeth II since February 1952. Currently, the Lord Speaker is the Lord Fowler, and the Speaker of the House of Commons is John Bercow. John Bercow is the Speaker of the House of Commons since 22nd June 2009. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The Parliament of the United Kingdom and Ireland was created on 1st January 1801 by the merger of kingdoms of Great Britain and Ireland under the Acts of Union 1800. The principle of ministerial responsibility did not develop until the 19th century. The House of Lords was superior to the House of Commons in both theory and practice. However, currently the House of Commons is superior. How it became superior we will see in the following lecture. The members of parliaments were elected in an antiquated electoral system. That is, the constituencies were varying in a great extent from one constituency to one constituency. Some of them were large and some of them were small. For example, in some constituencies 7 voters could elect 1 MP. Many small constituencies, which are also known as pocket or rotten boroughs, were under direct control of lords. So the lords could ensure the election of their relatives and supporters in those constituencies. Through Reforms Act 1832, the electoral system of House of Commons was progressively regularized. No longer after these Reforms Acts of 1832, member parliaments, MPs, were no longer dependent on the lords for their seats, so MPs grew more assertive. The supremacy of House of Commons was established in the early 20th century. In 1909, the House of Commons passed the so-called People's Budget. From here, the story towards the supremacy of House of Commons began. In 1909, they had passed a budget which is so-called the People's Budget. This People's Budget made numerous changes to the taxation system, which was detrimental to the wealthy landlords. The House of Lords, which was primarily composed of landlords, rejected the budget because it was against their interest. This budget got very much popular in public because it was good for common people. With this popularity of budget, Liberal Party narrowly won 2 general elections in 1910. And using the result of elections as a mandate, the Liberal Prime Minister of that time, Herbert Enrique Asquith, introduced another bill called Parliamentary Bill. This Parliamentary Bill sought to restrict the powers of House of Lords. It reduces the powers of House of Lords. However, Asquith did not introduce the land tax provision of People's Budget in this bill, as it was curtailing the powers of lords, so the lords refused to pass the bill. And Asquith counter-attacked the lords through the sacred promise with the king to increase liberal peers by several hundreds. So the increase in liberal peers by several hundreds could easily reduce the conservatives' majority in House of Lords. So in fear of a reduction in their majority in House of Lords, the House of Lords narrowly passed the bill. So at that point, this start of curtailing the powers of House of Lords started. And then if we will continue this story, the Parliament Act 1911, as it became, prevented the Lords from blocking a money bill and allowed them to delay any other bill to maximum of 3 sessions. It was further reduced to 2 sessions in 1949. So after 1949, House of Lords could delay a bill to maximum of 2 sessions. After 2 sessions, if House of Lords is not going to pass that bill, it automatically become a law. So in legislative matters, the powers of House of Lords become just a symbolic power, and the actual powerhouse of legislation become House of Commons. And as far as money bills are concerned, House of Lords do not have any right to criticize that bill. They could only pass that bill, and in that matter as well, they are just symbolic legislators, and the actual legislators are the members of parliament, that are the members of House of Commons. Despite all these reforms, Act of 1911 and Act of 1949, in which the powers of House of Lords has been curtailed to a very great extent, but still the House of Lords enjoy an unrestricted power of veto to restrain the bill extending the life of Parliament. It means House of Commons can make any legislation, but they cannot legislate to extend the life of Parliament. The House of Lords enjoy the veto power to restrain such a bill. The Government of Ireland Act 1920 created the parliaments of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland and reduced the representation of both parts in Westminster. The number of Northern Ireland seats was increased after the introduction of direct rule in 1973. The Irish Free State was become independent in 1922, and in 1927 the Parliament was renamed as the Parliament of United Kingdom of Britain and Northern Ireland. And after that, further reforms were made to the Parliament in the 20th century. In 1958, a bill was passed called the Life Peerage Act 1958. It authorized the regular creation of life peerage dignities. By the 1960s, the regular creation of hereditary peerage dignities had ceased. Therefore, all new peers were life peers only. The House of Lords Act 1999 removed the automatic right of hereditary peers to sit in upper house, although it made an exception for 92 of them to be elected for life terms by the other hereditary peers with by-elections upon their death. The Constitutional Reforms Act 2005 reduced the judicial function of House of Lords with the creation of new Supreme Court of UK in October 2009. Before that, through convention in British Constitution, which is an unwritten document, we will have another lecture on the constitutional development of Britain as well, in which we will discuss about how it is unwritten. Through conventions, the House of Lords has the power of judiciary as well, but the Constitutional Reform Act 2005 reduced this function, and now after all those bills, the House of Lords is now the chamber that is subordinate to the House of Commons, and the actual legislative powerhouse is the House of Commons, not House of Lords. House of Lords are just symbolic legislators. They have only one legislative authority which they could enforce on House of Commons. That is, if House of Commons is going to pass a bill in which life of Parliament is extended, then House of Lords can veto that power, and the remaining other bills could not be criticized by House of Lords. They could just only pass them to the Queen, who has the sovereign authority to sign the bill. That's all about the history of British Parliament. For more lectures, please visit and subscribe to our channel.